Hello, my name is Exabu, and welcome to part 2 of my cracking Panzer Corps 2 Axis Operations 1942 DLC. And its midsection is offering us a little fork in the missions, and as usual when these things happen, the big question is, which one to take? So after a couple of spats in and around Voronezh, we can either go to the north along with the 11th Army and Erich von Manstein, or roll down south taking craploads of land near Caucasus. And as you may have guessed from this video's thumbnail, Caucasus is out to kill you, and you should only choose this branch if you're looking for a challenge. Novorossiysk has its tricks, but it's largely digestible, whereas Grozny is like chugging on a bottle of hot sauce to treat a heartburn. It's easily the toughest mission of the entire DLC and one of the toughest scenarios of Panzer Corps 2 as we know it. I've got a few tips for you on how to crack it, but even with them, don't expect it to be easy. Easy though is the word I would describe the northern branch, even though both of the scenarios are really enjoyable with an unexpected defensive mission, and then proceed to scour a forest near Leningrad where Manstein lost a baby. A baby that turns out to be a pretty cool hero in the end. So North has a lot to offer too, despite the lower challenge. And before we get to the missions, let's just talk about the settings I use for the game. I play on maximum generalissimus difficulty, and even though all of the rest of the settings are defaults, I always complete all of the offensive scenarios at least 5 turns early. The race against time challenge is a bit glitchy and I've turned it off, but I'm still maintaining its spirit in my gameplay. And here are my now usual commander traits. Let me just point out that the cross minor rivers ability of Master of Blitzkrieg is rather weak in Axis operations, even though I still appreciate that 1 movement points for my tanks. Meticulous planning, on the other hand, is on the verge of being completely OP, because in addition to all of the obvious shuffle in, shuffle out trickery you can do with artillery or the other stuff, meticulous planning allows you to move a unit and then reinforce it, and with heroes like field repairs, move that unit and still get 1 point of repairs. So if you haven't considered it in your playthroughs, give it a try and see the wealth of tactical opportunities that meticulous planning opens up. And now, on to the missions. Voronezh is a huge, elongated red herring of a mission. And let me just dump that little secret on you from the start. Most of this map, you don't even really need to show up in. The nasty Soviet mechanized core on its HQ, which you need to destroy, is at the north about halfway between Staroskol and Voronezh, and essentially the movement of all of your troops should reflect that. You really don't have too much time, so you should take the shortest route that doesn't involve you blasting through Staroskol and all of the defenses between Staroskol and Voronezh. Also keeping in mind that Voronezh itself is very well defended if attacked from the river. So move straight northeast, inch along the edge of the map. It's very tempting to take that airfield northeast of Staroskol, but please don't bother, it will still take a lot of time, but do bring a couple of AA guns because there will be a couple of turns when your fighters are just not within range. Once you deal with the enemy HQ in the north, set up a bridging pioneer and squeeze most of your troops onto the other bank. Use the hills to your advantage. Having at least one 21cm mortar is a very good idea. Voronezh is well defended, as I said. They have some heavy artillery covering it, and the northern route is actually not the easiest one, it's just the faster one. And a bit of long-range capability to suppress their utility units will come in handy. I also recommend sending a force or a few tanks and a couple of anti-tank units south along the western bank of the river. There will be a couple of very strong Soviet tank units near Voronezh, and preventing them from hitting your flank and blocking their entrance into the city if they decide to counterattack you there is a very good idea. And speaking of tank destroyers, I highly recommend you to leave Sturemil and Dicker Max in the hangar for this one because they're way too slow for the mission. Marders are a much better choice in this case. I don't know why I'm even including Voroshilovgrad in this video because, unlike Cerberus, this scenario is excessively easy and there are only a few tips that I can offer. 1. Most of the frontline airfields held by the Hungarians are gonna fall into Soviet hands, but this is not true for the airfield halfway east of Voronezh. It'll take the Soviets a long time to get there, and this is a perfect short-range base for your best fighters. Speaking of which, don't overdo them. While the Red Air Force seems to be quite numerous here, you will grind through it very quickly, and then you suddenly need all of those bombers. Obviously, Bf-109Zs and Bf-110s are a good compromise, but overall, 50-50, 60-40 fighters to bombers should be a good ratio. Finally, it's very possible to hold the airfield in the middle of the forest. The Soviets will stage a pretty serious infantry attack there, but your bombers are very capable of repelling it, and then you have an airfield that is very convenient for supporting the attacks on the northern objectives. Otherwise, with a little bit of bomber help, the Hungarian troops are very capable and will kick out the Soviets out of the objectives, mostly on their own. Novorossiysk is a huge scenario that gets stressful right from the start. The Reds killing my oils! And indeed, the Reds killing the oils at Kharkov kind of requires your immediate attention. But let me assure you, it's not that big of a deal, and you have a comfortable 11 to 12 turns before the Soviet conscripts actually destroy those rigs. And that time is easily enough to take all of the north bank of the Kuban River. What's south of the river is actually the hardest bit, and everything you do prior to that should be geared towards completing these objectives in such a way that you can easily take Novorossiysk. So your initial step will be to advance directly south from Timashevsk towards Ivanovskaya, which will not be particularly well defended, and branching out with a small force towards Belikov. There is actually a small Soviet counterattacking force west of Timashevsk, but I've found that if you don't go there, the attackers will move east somewhat, but not enough to cause you any trouble. Once Belikov and Ivanovskaya are yours, advance south. Neither Kharkov nor Krasnodar are well defended. There will be some resistance between Kharkov and Belikov, but otherwise slowly converge your troops on Kharkov, leaving only a smaller force to take over Krasnodar and blocking the bridges across the river. The reasoning for this is twofold. A, you need to get as many forces, as much firepower, as close to Novorossiysk as possible, and Kharkov is a good springboard for that, and Krasnodar is pretty far away. And B, there is a big Soviet armored counterattack waiting for you on the other bank of the river, so prepare a little bit of a defense and block those bridges to prevent getting T-34s attacking your flanks. Consolidating your anti-air defenses there might also be a good idea. But once you cross the river, your main focus should be Novorossiysk, especially the northern approach to the city, because I've found the east to be a bit troublesome. It's full of hills and very active Soviet infantry and artillery, so going in there might spell a trap for you. Not to mention the fact that with enough good artillery support and you have hills for more range, you will be able to break the defenders of Novorossiysk rather handily.
Grozny is a Russian word that stands for fearsome and formidable.
And this is what this mission will be. It'll kick your butt. There's just no way around that. The Soviets have a huge pool of units and you just have barely enough. And the fact that you need to take Mount Elbrus makes this scenario particularly annoying. But first things first, let's point our fingers at the hardest part of the mission and cry. Grozny proper is pretty well defended, full of artillery, AT and AA guns, and the opposite bank of the Terek River is teeming with Soviet tank troops. The rest of the objectives are not going to cause you any serious trouble, and their challenge comes from the geographic distances that are between them. There will also be a bunch of cavalry/light tank units roaming about in the vast area between Petigorsk and Mirny. They will not try to retake any objectives, but be prepared for unpleasant surprises coming from behind, as we're not going to that vast area between Petigorsk and Mirny. The first objective will be Petigorsk indeed, but then we'll pivot south and take the village between Petigorsk and Alshigar and split off a few troops that will go to Mount Elbrus. And there are a few considerations to talk about here. One, it's full of very aggressive Soviet infantry, including mountaineers and guards, as well as a little AA support and artillery. These guys will not stop attacking you. You really need to clear the area before you take the objective, or hold it, at least. The second bit is that it's very likely that many of the troops you'll send there will not be too helpful elsewhere. Once again, just because of the distances, buses and the lack of trains. So my approach there is to send a strong, fully equipped, preferably Infanteria Azul or similar infantry, covered with a few paratroopers and initially rocket artillery units and maybe a tank to cover the flanks. Make sure that the tank is a T-34 so that you can quickly pull it out, along with the rocket artillery as soon as the Soviet resistance there is mostly dealt with. The airfield north of the mountain is critical here as well, because once that Soviet air gun goes down, you will be able to use air support to soften up the Soviet resistance in the mountains. Once you see that you've gone through most of the enemies there, start pulling all of your normal units out of the area and leave it all to the paratroopers. Also remember that the Alpine hexes are a no transport area, so it's a bad idea to try and capture it with any heavier half-track equipped infantry. In any case, once Elbrus is yours, you can move your paratroopers to the airfield and hopefully there is still time for you to paradrop them somewhere usefully. Back to the main thrust. Once you take the nameless objective village, advance east, there can be small Soviet counterattacks and the Soviet activity in the air will be very intense. It's a very good idea to set up a temporary airfield here, and I've found mobile anti-air guns to be useful here as well. Oshiga is not going to cause you any trouble itself, but this is where we'll have to cross the river. And if you haven't seen them yet, those fortifications on the other side of it are nothing short of insane. AA guns in every airfield, AT guns at the bridges, heavy 203mm guns using counter-battery fire, and an extremely well-equipped fire brigade to counterattack you if you somehow manage to cross. So my approach here is don't rush it and prepare for some losses. I usually send in my most powerful infantry first, pummel the units sitting in the town with rocket artillery first, counter-battery fire be damned, even though a bomber unit with a lightning attack hero, i.e. Rudel, can be extremely helpful here in just destroying that 203mm gun. So the goal here really is to kill the unit sitting in the village and squeeze another infantry unit in so that you already have a foothold. It can take a couple of turns and be frustrating, but nobody promised it would be easy. While you are breaking through though, allocate a detachment of troops to take care of the remaining objectives on your side of the river. An infantry, 1 rocket artillery, and maybe 3 tanks should be enough to do the job. Neither of these objectives are well defended. Well, Maisky kind of is, but don't expect too much trouble at the objectives themselves. Now, once you break out north of Maisky, you will encounter a pretty serious Soviet counterattack with tanks, including KV-1, so maybe having some air support in the area might be a good idea. The Soviets also have a lot of bombers based in Mirny, which makes anti-air capability in the area also important. But once that counterattack is dealt with, neither Mozdok nor Mirny will cause you any trouble. Now back to what will cause you trouble, and it's the ungodly Soviet counterattack that will get triggered once you cross the Terek. So my approach here is bring in tank destroyers covered by anti-air guns. Yes, the Soviets will fly in air support, effectively form this small defensive circle that slowly moves towards Grozny. It's also a very good idea to stick to the edge of the map. This way you'll avoid Soviet artillery fire from the defenders at the Terek, and the defensive circle you have to set up will be effectively cut in two. And once you grind through the Soviet tank wave, you can approach Grozny from the rather undefended southern side. The city is full of AT guns, and some of the artillery will cause you trouble, but if you have enough of your own and bring 2 or 3 strong infantry units here, if you manage to bring your Mount Elbrus paratroopers here, congratulations. Just suppress the artillery and squeeze the defenders of the city out of it. Good luck. Operation Nordlicht is German for "Hello, Manstein, let's have a drink." Oh wait, is this the Soviets? They're pissed off at us blockading Leningrad. Let's fight. Based on a true story. Anyway, we're getting a defensive scenario in this one, and it's not gonna be too difficult, but there are a few things we need to keep in mind to actually and easily succeed in it. One, while the briefing tells us that the Soviets are coming in from the east, there will also be an attempt to cross the river from the west, bridging pioneers and everything, so it's kind kinda prompts you where you should make your stand. The area between Shlisselburg and Moskovskaya Dubrovka is eminently defensible. The hills are brilliant for setting up your heavy artillery that'll simply dominate the area. It's actually a good idea to send a recon plane across the river so that your heavy 21cm mortars can intercept Soviet artillery shooting from the other side. As usual these days, the Soviets will bring craploads of aircraft, so make sure to set up a strong screen against them, and plopping anti-air guns on those hills are a really good idea. And this brings me to what you should do in the east. And the answer is very simple, just don't go there. There are no downsides to defending at Shlisselburg, and if you advance east and try to turn it into a meeting engagement, you will lose the defensive advantages of the hills and will expose yourself to flanking attacks. So all you should do in the west is retreat as much as possible. Most of the non-core troops there are inexperienced and pretty worthless, but even if you bring a few anti-air guns and artillery into the Shlisselburg area, it's gonna be still pretty helpful. As a final note, please be careful about the forest just east of Shlisselburg. It's very tempting to load it full of infantry and try and trap Soviet tanks in it. However, at least on maximum difficulty, some of the Soviet infantry units in this mission are extremely powerful and numerous, and they can easily single out and swamp and kill your infantry even if supported by artillery. So luring the tanks into the open and actually destroying them with your AT guns might be a better idea. And the last scenario we've got for today, Battle of Lake Ladoga, takes us on a journey looking for someone in a deep forest. Kind of reminds me of another mission where we look for Rommel in France, except 2,000 kilometers to the east. And big spoilers! Manstein's son is east of Khotovo, just on the other side of the river. You've guessed it, you need a bridging pioneer unit in this mission. In general, it's pretty easy, but you need to keep two things in mind. One, supply units that you're supposed to destroy include not only the supply dumps, but also the Soviet mobile airfields which are scattered across the map, and airfield bulldozers. Actually, a quarter of them are concentrated in the bottom right corner of the map, which is another reason to get a bridging pioneer. The second bit about this mission is that Volkhov is a huge red herring. It does not contain any supply units, you don't need it for anything, so unless you have time to spare, don't send your troops there. Your main thrust should be directed at Khotovo and the areas beyond it to the east and the south. Be careful about advancing there because the forests in the center are crawling with Soviet infantry and some tanks and auxiliary units, and they will not hesitate to attack your flanks, but overall it feels more like an anti-insurgent operation. You will not get an organized front trying to stop you. Just send a couple of units, a strong infantry and artillery, to take that harbor village because it contains two supply units, but those are the only units north of Volkhov on this map. Finally, when it comes to your air force, you should follow the advice provided in the briefing and only bring recons, but having a little bit of AA artillery might be a good idea because the Soviets will have a few Peshkas there. Also, don't forget that Focke-Wulf 189 has an attack rating, and combined with Rudel and similar heroes, it'll smack land targets like the best of them. And this is it for today. Stay tuned for part 3, which is coming soon. Very, very soon. I'm really looking forward to sharing my opinions about this somewhat unorthodox DLC, which is particularly annoying right now because I've played pretty much all of it. But until then, please subscribe and like. I really love it when you do all of those clickety things. Cheers.